I'm Chris Terranova, and this is the Generational Exchange. 4 generations, 1 conversation. The business world is a tapestry woven from different threads. The experience of seasoned veterans, the tech-savvy energy of the younger generation, and everything in between. In this podcast, we'll unravel those threads, exploring the unique perspectives from panelists in their 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s on today's business challenges. By bringing together these unique voices, we hope to spark new ideas, bridge the generation gap, and equip listeners with a well-rounded approach to navigating the ever-evolving business landscape. All right, well, gentlemen, we are on episode 10, if you can believe that. It has been a quick 10 episodes, but very exciting. And unfortunately, we don't have the entire panel here this week. The lovely and talented Mark Russell is away on assignment, but he will be back with us the next time we meet. So for now, you're going to have to suffer through with just the 3 of us. And for those of you listening, we have Rhett Suchu representing someone in their 30s. Welcome, Rhett.
Hello.
And representing someone in their 40s, as always, is our friend Jeremy Davidson. Good evening, sir.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And I'm Chris Terranova, and I'm representing someone in their 50s, and we'll have a blank spot without Mark here today, but we will circle the wagons and so soldier on. All right. So last week, we talked about how to ace an interview when you're in the role of being interviewed. I have to say that was one of my favorite episodes because we talked about something that so many of us have gone through or are actually going through. And, as a matter of fact, I want to take a quick moment at the beginning of the podcast to announce that I actually have started a new position as the Chief Services Officer at a company called chapter1.org. And they focus on high impact tutoring for kindergarten through 2nd grade students. I'm so excited to be starting there, but I wanted to mention that. Yay, right? Very exciting.
Congratulations.
Thank you, guys. I wanted to mention that because I used so many of the tips and tricks that we talked about on last week's episode. I really did feel prepared. I really did feel like I was a interview rock star after going through our suggestions and doing a lot of that. And Jeremy, I know you recently just got hired on in a new position and you went through a bunch of interviews and helped us build out that episode clearly. Do you want to quickly touch on how that impacted you? Because I think if people haven't listened to that episode, it's a great episode, and there's just a lot of really good stuff in there that we've taken from our experience.
Sure, yeah. If they can hear me, I've upgraded my microphone, so
and we thank you for that.
No, gosh, of course. I think nearly everything we talked about in that episode was applicable. Everything from researching. Stacy, our phenomenal CEO, she was the lead character in a lot of those YouTube videos that I went on, and I researched about the company. So that was my anecdotal story about meeting the celebrity during the interview, right?
Right.
Kind of breaking the ice, and all the way down to how you interact slightly differently with recruiting, right? Different types of questions, how you prepare for and get ready for that final interview, whether it's with the hiring manager or in my case with kind of a board, a group of folks, and a big final assessment. What are they looking for? But no, it was great. I I had a lot of fun in that episode too. I feel really bad that my audio was muffled, but that might be my most fun one so far until today.
This is going to be, it's going to be a supersized one. We're going to have a great time. Real quick too, I'd be remiss if I didn't give a huge thanks to my wife who supported me through all this and let me kind of go on this crazy journey of taking a sabbatical and starting a podcast and starting a new job, right? You guys, of course, you were the impetus for the podcast. I don't think I would have gotten through all of this if I didn't have you guys by my side. And I do want to give a special shout out to one of a friend and an avid podcast listener of ours, Clint Mitchell. You guys all provided me feedback and guidance, and honestly, kind of an occasional kick in the ass when I started to get down on the process. We have talked through all of these episodes about the power of having a strong support system. And I have to tell you, mine truly came through for me during this entire process, right? Because I wasn't even looking necessarily for that long, and I don't mean that in an arrogant way, but I do understand how frustrating it can be, right? And having you guys to back me up and support me and all of that, I couldn't have done it without you. So I wanted to thank everybody and thank you guys especially.
I think to a T, we were right about that 60-day, that 2-month mark
Yeah.
each.
Yeah.
And the amount of ups and downs and highs and lows in that little 2-month stretch. No, my heart goes out to the folks that we've been working with and talking to and helping along the way that have been looking for significantly longer. So hopefully something we're sharing here in this episode or the last episode or mentoring episode, hopefully that resonates with folks because it can be hard.
For sure.
Yeah. Yeah, and I hope they'll share when they do get that job, right? On our post, below our post. We'd love to celebrate with you guys those wins as well, because we admittedly a bit of this podcast is for us, right? And getting to talk to each other and support each other, but we're also doing this hoping to be able to communicate with you all and give something to you and help you out. So if we are and we can celebrate that with you, we would love to.
Yeah, and we'd love to hear about it. So if you have any thoughts or comments, put a note on LinkedIn or shoot a note on the podcast or send us an email. We give you the email every week, but we'd love to hear from you. All right.
We can shout you out like we shouted out Mr. Clint, who
That's
is
right.
phenomenal, by the way. If there happens to be anybody looking for an outstanding technologist and
Manager and leader.
manager, yep.
Yeah, 100%, right? Look him up on LinkedIn.
That's right. He's our one viewer.
There you go. We're in double digits now. How dare you? Stop that.
Listen, we have at least 3.
That's right.
That's right.
I got to talk to him this week, actually. Amazing guy.
He is an amazing guy.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Great conversation.
All right. You better write me a check after this. Okay. Now that we got all that foolishness out of the way, let's talk about this week's topic. We're kind of doing acing the interview hiring manager edition, right? We wanted to dive in and give you the perspective of what you can do as a hiring manager. You're not looking for a job, you're looking for someone to fill a job. How do you make sure you're getting quality candidates? You're making the most of your time interviewing, you get value from all of those conversations. It can be a real time waster if you don't do it right. And between the 3 of us, and if we threw in Mark, it would be even bigger. But I bet you we've interviewed over 1,000 people in our careers, maybe even more, right? So in all fairness, we know a thing or two about a thing or two when it comes to interviewing and hiring the right people. Mark hired me, so he's a genius. And then I hired these 2, so I'm a genius, right?
No.
Jeremy hired me.
I hired you after Jeremy hired you, so I guess we're all geniuses.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
But we do know some things about this. So today, as usual, we're going to give you 5 things you should do as a hiring manager and 3 things not to do as a hiring manager. So with that, let's start the exchange. All right, let's dive right into it. Here are 5 things that a hiring manager can do to ensure they find quality people to interview for an open position. And as we caveat everything on the show, I'm sure there are a million things and there's a million things that we haven't thought of. These are the things that we've really gone through and know that they work all the time. But if you have other things, throw them in the comments. We'd love to hear from you. All right, the first one is craft a compelling job description. Clarity is really important here. If you can clearly define the position's responsibilities, the skills required, the ideal candidate profile, you're going to find people that fit what you need more effectively. Make sure you're highlighting the company culture. If there's company values or a work environment or unique benefits that are special for that company, you could attract the right kind of talent there. And then the last one, and I'll pause, is make sure you've got action verbs and specifics. Use action verbs to describe the desired skills and provide specific examples of what success looks like in the role. A lot of times, and again, we've gone through this, reading job descriptions, by the time I'm done, sometimes I have no idea what that job is about. It's either it's a word salad or it's so vague, right? I don't know. I have no sense of the company. I'm not even sure what they do sometimes. But guys, based on that, Red, I'm going to throw it to you first. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is really important both for if you're building a JD that you're going to be using and hiring off of, right? But especially if you're giving it to an HR team that has HR managers that are going through resumes and looking for the key things that you put on there. If you don't make this clear, you can end up getting a lot of candidates that don't fit your JD and are just, using your time and their time for no reason. And then you end up just spending more time interviewing people for the sake of interviewing them. The one of the kind of equivalents of this I kind of think of is if you ask a vague question, you'll probably get a vague answer, right? So there are times that you want to be very specific about what you're looking for, even if what you're looking for is for someone who's very flexible and very good at organizing their time. You should describe that, right? And so I think clarity is definitely big there. Yeah. Jeremy, what do you think?
Oh gosh, yeah. The one of the big pet peeves going around LinkedIn right now is the companies that list the position as remote, and then down in the job description areas have, must live in this state,
Oh yeah.
or in this, 3 days in the office, or flex schedule. Along with that clarity, I think comes transparency, right?
Mm,
Advertise for what you're looking for. There was a time in my career where I was like, heck yeah, I'll take remote. And there's been times in my career where I was like, if there was an office near me that was hiring, I'd love to go to an office and have that water cooler time and FaceTime. And uh,
right.
so, advertise for what you're looking for. If you're getting a whole bunch of applicants for, a remote position, folks that want to work remote that are spread out across the country, if that's not what you're looking for, you're not going to hire them anyway. So just put hybrid on your job post. So I think that clarity, we could probably do clarity slash transparency there. Um,
Can
the
I, real quick, can I jump in on the hybrid thing?
Yeah.
I think that if you're going to use the term hybrid, define what hybrid means. And that was something that I struggled with when I was looking for a job,
Mm.
because
Mm,
hybrid to me, after working remote for 15 years, was I went to the office every other week in New York, right? That was hybrid. But does hybrid mean you have to live within 20 miles and go to the office 3 days a week? Or is it you travel once every couple of weeks
right.
and come visit? Define what hybrid is, right? Because we're all self-interpreting what hybrid is. And a lot of the jobs that I got rejected from were hybrid jobs, but I applied for them anyway because I didn't know what they meant. Right. And so I just throwing that out there, I think that can cause confusion.
Sure. Yeah. I've got a question for the panel.
Yes. And if you're not watching the video, you should watch, because Jeremy has discovered the fun of backgrounds. So he's having a wonderful time this evening.
Hey, what can I say? I absolutely love it.
Oh God.
Now he's got he's
If,
got hearts. He's got hearts. Go
if,
on.
All
uh,
right.
Great. Get to it, man.
I've got my question background. Isn't there? There's an evil villain out there, right? On one of the Batmans that has
The
I'm
the
sure.
unveil or
question
something,
marks.
I thought.
Um, no, in all seriousness, kind of a question to you guys that I was thinking of, because gosh, jumped into the new role, and I've got the opportunity to hire and expand out the team already. So just kind of went through a writing a job description exercise, and I've been noodling on the idea of moving from bullets to a narrative, because I've seen that a couple of times from companies that really lay out in a narrative format company culture, what you're going to be doing, what it takes to be successful, in a move away from bullet points. And I'm just kind of curious, what are you guys' thoughts on that?
Chris, what do you think? I think I've been on such a kick of moving from narrative to bullets that
Oh,
it almost feels counter for me. I started with narratives for Chris, and he said if I sent him another, he'd fire me. So
well, I guess we know what Chris thinks then.
No, I think it's interesting, because I think one of the things that you use bullets for, to me, is brevity, right? And
mm,
to
Oh,
Brett's point, when you're writing a summary for an executive, I want 5 bullet points. If you can't explain it to me in 5 bullet points, I don't have time to read 4 pages. That
right.
said, in a job description, what we're talking about using action verbs, explaining corporate culture, clearly defining what the role is, having the space to write that out and truly be authentic with what the job is rather than trying to fit it into 7 bullets could really provide value. I think the other thing it does is it removes the people who don't take the time to read the whole thing, right?
Yeah.
They're glancing, and if you can glance through it, or you're using AI or easy apply or whatever you're using, and you can really kind of weed out the people who didn't take the time to read that whole thing. Not that you have to put, you must like bananas somewhere in there to catch them, but it's more like you can really be true, and you'll start to be able to easily weed out the people that like, well, that doesn't match anything that we talked about, right?
Right.
So just my 2 cents. I'm glad I'm surprising you guys, but I would think actually a narrative in that situation might be better.
No, that's interesting. And so would you, I guess you would take, because I was thinking of it as, let's say you have 5 to 7 bullet points on kind of what the responsibilities are and such. Would you then blend like those 7 bullets into more of a narrative of what it involves rather than like each bullet is its own narrative, right?
Yeah, where I was coming from there is most job descriptions, and we call them job descriptions, JDs, right?
Yeah.
Are really a requirements list.
Hmm.
Um, and that's where kind of you see those bulleted items. This is what we need. But when it comes to trying to convey what the company culture is, or the actual day-to-day functions of the job, um, and maybe that's the primary position of that first interview, right, with the recruiter, is to kind of get into a little bit of that. But I just remember, as part of the search process, coming across this a couple of times that where it was done extremely well, thinking, gosh, if I could figure out a way to replicate that, this position or this opportunity, the way it's listed, really resonated with me. Yeah, I was just kind of curious your guys' thoughts on that, but and maybe
It's
it's a way to
interesting.
stand out in the crowd.
Yeah, it's an interesting approach, and as I look back on my resume journey, if you will, I think there were a couple where the way they described the company made me more interested, and I probably spent more time answering the questions more completely, and trying to probably customize my resume more effectively because there was so much detail to also glean and kind of align your cover letter or align your opening statement or whatever. You had more to there was more meat on the bone to grab. So I think it's an interesting idea.
I think the reason it resonated with me, and I know you guys operate in a similar way, when we're out there looking to fill a position or multiple positions, we're looking for the right person for the role, certainly. But I think we probably agree across the board. We're also looking for somebody where this is the right role for them, right? It's not the right
Right.
role in the moment. It's this is what I want to be doing. This is what I'm excited about. This is what I'm passionate about. And I wonder if there's a way to even elicit more of that through the job description. Do you know what I mean? Where you get a little bit more of a feel for, is this going to be the right thing for me? Uh,
Yeah.
but
I think it's a really good point because I know, like on LinkedIn Premium now, they have an AI feature that says, "Is this job the right fit for me?" And based on the introductory paragraph or whatever I would read, I'd be like, "Oh, I could apply for that." And then the AI was actually catching, which I thought was interesting because they were so descriptive. It would be like, "Well, but I don't see that you have 8 years of financial management experience." And I'm like, I didn't even catch that in there,
for
right?
sure.
So I, I think having more, it also allows now the bots and the AI to have more to give feedback on, and it might also help narrow that funnel so you don't get 5,000 applicants. You might get 100 really good ones that are better aligned with what you need, so you can interview that 10 or that 5 or
Right.
whatever you decide to interview. So I think it's a really interesting idea. I'd love to
Yeah.
see what you come up with and what you get back.
Yeah.
I
And
think
we
so.
we could probably call out for any of you all listening right now. We can tell when your stuff is AI generated. Especially if it's tailored. If everybody's using the AI generator tool in, let's say, LinkedIn, right, and they're comparing it against the job description, the bullet points look the same.
It's
Uh,
a good point.
That is
I
true.
did see that in ChatGPT now you can say make this sound more human and it customizes it.
Oh
So
gosh.
so
Oh,
that's interesting. So you can put that as a prompt is make this sound more human. So, but that's going to be a different episode. We're going to get into tools
That's
on a different
interesting.
episode.
I
All
think
right.
that
Any other thoughts on this before we move on to the next point?
to the well, I think did we already discuss company culture? Is that our next one? Because I
No,
think
this isn't this one, company culture.
good. I think like Jeremy was saying, it's really big about, you know, people aren't just applying for the job, they're applying for the company and everything that comes with it. So I think, like you were saying, Jeremy's point about the paragraph being able to, or the narrative format being able to more explain kind of an example of what being at the company is like, or something to that effect, can really help with that part of it. Yeah.
Well, and it may not be for everybody. Describing what the company culture is like, can help either bring people in, or, if they're like, hey, we have video calls every Tuesday to celebrate pizza night or whatever, they're gonna be like, oh God, put a gun in my mouth. Or that might be like, that's exactly the kind of environment I'm looking for, right? And again, it's a way to find the right people and weed out the ones that aren't there. But you have to highlight the right things. Probably pizza night is probably not the right one.
Absolutely.
All right. We good to move on?
Yes, sir.
All right. So this next one, I want to say is an interesting one, right? We called it diversifying your recruitment channels. And it's what we mean by that is, a lot of times you have HR, they're posting it on LinkedIn for you. They're posting it on Glassdoor. It's here, it's there. But I know when we were starting to grow at our last organization, we were growing very quickly. We had to kind of go beyond the job boards, not just the job boards itself. You could post things, and I do this now. If you follow me on LinkedIn, which I encourage you to do, I'm always posting new jobs. Jeremy is always posting new jobs, not for our companies, but we see things in our network, and we know we've got several thousand friends on our network that might be interested. We go beyond that, right? So if you're a hiring manager, don't be afraid to post your job on your LinkedIn page, not just on the job board, right? Or look in other areas. The other thing that we used to do, which I think was a really good one, especially when you're fast growing, or you've got really talented people, is an employee referral program, right? If you have a referral program, you can give a bonus or give a prize or a gift card or something like that for existing employees to reach out to their network and bring somebody in. I can't tell you how many people at our last EdTech organization came from our pool of friends. I think half of the CSM team were friends with Rhett, and half of the leadership team, one of us had brought in at some point along the way, right? So, and we used our own internal networks, our own family and friends and colleagues to find people. So don't be afraid to go beyond just the job board. Guys, I'll turn it over to you. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think the most important part there that you mentioned was that your employees already know these people that they're referencing, right? And so with that, you get an understanding of who they're bringing in before you even interview them, right? Especially if you trust these individuals, they're not going to give you a recommendation of someone who maybe doesn't know how to jump in with both feet, or has a go-getter attitude, or whatever it may be there. So I think that's a big point that can help you get through that. What may be your first and maybe second interview of candidates is, this person already has that. Now, do they have the skill set, the hard skills that we need to do it? Because as Jeremy said in a previous episode, there are certain soft skills and things that you can't teach. And a lot of those can be helped out, I think, by referrals by your current employees.
What do you think, Jay?
And it gives you I love referrals. Gosh, I think that's why the discussion we had on the importance of networking in your job search, or if you're looking for that next opportunity, is so important. Especially starting out in a new role. And congratulations, by the way. We sent up the rocket ships, but congratulations on the new role. Super excited.
Very excited.
When you're starting out a new role in particular, you get the opportunity to fill a couple of positions. You want those folks to be super strong, right? I think there's a tendency to to lean towards folks that you know, reach out to folks that you know. But in lieu of that, a referral from an employee, like I've been on the job about 3 weeks now. I've gotten a chance to get to know and well, get to meet and get to know all the folks on my team. And at this point, if I had a referral from them that said this person is going to be a rock star, I'd be willing to stake my reputation on it. I would take that hands down, right? Like it means the world of difference. So just a quick shout out to those folks that are still job searching out there. If you can reach out and make a connection with somebody at a company that's at that peer group level, that colleague level, it makes a big difference. Referrals make a big difference.
It does. It helps, it at least gets you through the door a lot of times. It doesn't guarantee you a job, but it does get you in the door, right? And if you are an employee referring somebody, or as a hiring manager, you're setting up the referral program, make sure they understand this is a reputational thing. We're talking to them because you recommended them, right?
Mhm.
You want to bring us good quality people, not just, somebody so you can get the $100 or whatever the reward is. And we're not going to hire them anyway. So make sure they're the right candidate, for the environment. I like that one. I think it's again sometimes taking ownership of the role that you're hiring for. Uh,
Sure. Well, and I think even the call out there to diversify the recruitment channels can be important, right?
mhm.
Because you're reaching out to a wider audience, broader audience. You're getting the potential for a wider candidate pool full of different perspectives, different
Right.
experiences, different. They're bringing different things to the table. And that's always a look for when you're adding to your team, right? How do you bring together this diverse group of minds, diverse group of people that's really going to be adding value to those team discussions and to your customers and to your partners, whatever it is that you're doing.
Yeah.
So the channel could 100% impact that, the quality of that kind of diversity.
Yeah, well, and you're talking about tackling a problem from multiple different angles, right? Which I think we had a really good management group that tackled a problem from 5 different angles. And so by the end of it, you had a solid answer. That was the most probably the best way to proceed. Which I think fits that point as far as like when you're talking about diverse backgrounds and ways of thinking, like there are many ways you can get to that point, but how do you build the best and strongest team that'll tackle the problem from multiple different angles?
I think that's right. Okay, you guys ready to move on? Because I know this one's going to be a meaty one for us, right? I'm gonna talk to it quickly, and then I know you guys have been kind of previewing this for the last couple of weeks, so I'm excited for you guys to get into it. But the third one's develop a structured interview process. I think this is really important. And Jeremy and Rhett came up with a really cool process that I'm going to let them share. But in general, what that means is define interview stages, right? Have different stages of the interview with specific goals, like the initial screening, and then a skills assessment, and then a cultural fit evaluation. Standardize the questions, right? When I started interviewing a long time ago, I would ask everybody a different set of questions, and I was great. But what we did was we kind of created a rubric, and our friend Mark Russell would tell you, and I think he mentioned this on the last call, that he would give people extra points if they answered a question with a question. That was because we had standardized questions so that really anybody could step in and ask the question, but then you could also score them on a rubric. And that way you were being consistent with your answers. And that was something that was relatively new to me, probably in the last 5 or 7 years, was building a rubric out against a standard list of questions. That standardization really helps you evaluate fairly. And then I think this one's really important too, is involving a diverse group of interviewers, right? If you include different interviewers from different backgrounds and expertise, you get different perspectives on the candidate. And what we mean by that is, have the people adjacent to that role on another team that will be interacting with that role. What's their feedback on that person, right? Do they work there? I'm going to give one quick example, and then I'm going to turn it over to you guys. When I interviewed at the last ed tech company that I worked at, no exaggeration, I went through 17 interviews remotely, and then I got flown to New York and spent the entire day with, I think, the entire leadership team, from the president on down, I met with every single person I was going to interact with. And when I kind of joked about it, they said, listen, Jeremy said this earlier, we need to make sure you fit us, not just we fit you. Like this, you're sitting at our table. We need to make sure you fit. And it was an arduous process, but I knew by the end of that, I wanted to work there too. After, the 10th interview, if it wasn't right, I would have pulled my ripcord and parachuted out. But I thought it was an interesting process. Probably that was a little heavy-handed with the number of people. I think I ended up interviewing like 30 people in 6 weeks, but maybe that's a little heavy-handed. But having those different perspectives, because I met with different leaders and across the entire company, and so we all felt like, yeah, this person can work here. But guys, take it away. I know you've got some stuff you've been dying to talk about. I'm going to turn this part over to you.
Yeah, Jeremy, I mean, you were kind of the leader or the captain of the ship when we went about starting it. Do you kind of want to start it and I'll fill in? I
We'll
mean,
set the stage there.
yeah,
Sure. And we had a solid external candidate review process at that point, right? We kind of
right.
gone through and it may be worth pointing out here is if you're working to develop or improve on your interview process, I would encourage everybody to take time into consideration there.
Mm,
Uh, you know, and I think you can layer that depending on the level of the role, entry level, mid career, executive, senior leadership level, right? It's probably appropriate to have different different expectations at different levels. But I think it's worth calling out that if you're doing 7 interviews over a 2 or 3 month period of time for an individual contributor level, position,
mm,
I think it's worth reevaluating what your goals are and what you're hoping to achieve with that. Because and I don't think it sets the candidate up for success either, right? You're coming on board with a company that took 2 or 3 months to decide if you're the right person for the job. I know I'd be super excited going into a position like that. Well, boy, I'm glad they landed on me after. Um, so I think that's worth calling out. If you're going through, if you're looking at your process, if you're evaluating it, what's the timeline? I think that that's a consideration worth pulling out there. But no, what we wanted to chat about was this kind of, we had to re-envision a process for an internal position.
mm-hmm.
Um, so we had, I guess to kind of set the stage, we had multiple regions. Each region had a manager. This was for a customer success implementation team.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and a phenomenal group of individual contributors in each region, everyone from associate level to mid implementation manager to senior. We had a couple folks in lead positions that were taking on daily tactical operations and mentoring.
Right.
uh, just a great group of folks, and we had the opportunity to hire a manager for that, for a region. um, and what we decided, we had such an unbelievable talented internal pool that we were going to open it up internally. So we set the stage and we said, hey, we're opening this up internally.
Yep.
um, we encourage you to apply, even if you don't think you're ready for it. If you think this is an opportunity you would want now or at
Mhm.
some point in the future, apply for it. At a bare minimum, we give you practice, right? You get to
Yep.
go through some interviews. um, so we encourage everybody, and I want to say we had maybe 24, 25 people
Yeah.
in our department at that point. um, so we kicked that up. We said, if you're interested in applying, um, we encourage you to do that. And then Red, I'll turn it over to you and let you kind of explain, okay, so what that applying process end up looking like.
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, I think the first thing to note, which was great, which I think you should look for if you're doing this type of thing, is we opened it up to everyone and just about everyone signed up for it. So like, and to be fair, that's something you should consider, right? If you have a team of 500 people, don't necessarily offer it to 500 people unless you're ready to do that. Because then there's a lot of things to think through. And that's why this is interesting, is because if you're going to open it up to everyone, but then all of a sudden it's too many people, and then you consider not interviewing everyone, well, now you've set a bad expectation from the beginning, or you decide to interview them differently, or anything like that. And so we did think about it a lot as an internal team before we opened it up, as far as, hey, how much time is this going to take us as a team, right? And is that lemon worth the squeeze as far as this role? And so before we jumped in and opened this can of worms, I will say we looked at that position, and although it was a manager of a region, I mean, in that position, you dealt with the head of sales in the region, you dealt with DPMs, you dealt with your IPM team, you dealt with other executives. And so it was, and you were part of a group of, it would have been 5 once you were joined, that essentially onboarded every customer at the company. So it was really important that you were a good candidate, right? So just to note, we didn't do it lightheartedly. So think that through. But from there, what we went about is doing a lot of these steps of, okay, what are our interview steps going to be, right? What are these stages? Okay. And so what we did was we came up with a 2-stage system of both a written and a kind of speaking type interview, right? And so we had a written portion in which we gave a set of questions to everyone, and you had a set amount of time. I think it was like till a Friday at 5 p.m. Eastern or something to get these questions done, essentially, right? Turn it in with your best answers. We'll review them. We'll look at them, and based on that, we'll kind of go to the next stage. And then we had the speaking portion, which was an interview with all of the managers. And Jeremy, were you on that as well, or was it just a man? Yeah, Jeremy on there as well. And that was a bit more of a kind of see how they're answering questions, see which ways they're approaching the problems from. We'll get more into that in depth a little bit, and then also a touch of a stress test, right? Because sometimes, again, you're dealing with heads of sales in regions who can, you're the first line of defense before it gets to Jeremy. How much are you going to sift out before it gets to him or Chris? So, but anyways, to set the stage, it was a lot of forethought into, do you want to open this can of worms? And then a set of non-biased questions, and then a 2-set written and oral portion to set the stage there.
And there was a rubric for both, right? So
Yes.
as folks did their written, and I want to say we might have even masked the name of the person as we were kind of evaluating and
I think we
scoring.
did.
We collected that back up. And we were super transparent with the team on what we were doing too. Here's the questions. Here's how we're going to score them. Here's what we're doing during the hour-long panel interview. Here's how we're going to score it. And we kept the team informed along the way. And I think to Rhett's point, our biggest concern with the whole process was culturally, how do we not disrupt the dynamic of the team?
Mm-hmm.
Because now we've set ourselves up for 20 people that want a promotion, and one of them is going to get it, and 19 of them are going to not get it. And we don't want to disrupt the dynamic of the group, right? And I think the way what we landed on is the best way to do that was to be super candid, super transparent, keep everybody posted along the way of the process. And then as we wrapped up, we met with each of them individually and provided feedback. Here's how you did on your written. Here's how you did on your oral. Here's some areas for improvement. And it was incredibly interesting. Rhett laughs about the stress test because he got to be the one with the nuclear question that stressed everybody out. Oh gosh,
Yeah.
But we had in our minds that there were a couple of senior level candidates that were going to be awesome in the role, and how are we going to decide between them? And we had a candidate that was a relatively new hire, incredibly smart, came to us from DC politics, and had her master's degree already, not a lot of professional experience. And she tossed her name in the hat being an employee. I think she'd been there like 6 months.
Yep.
And as we went through the process, she blew everybody out of the water on the written. And then we pulled up and we did the panel interviews, and outscored everybody hands down on the panel interviews. And it was somebody on the team that we didn't have on our radar. Yeah. It was a phenomenal process. Did I do a spoiler alert there, Rhett?
No. You did just fine. It was, but yeah. And so, what that said to us though, when we got to, and it looks like Chris has questions about us / is questioning what we did without telling him, but I I think the best part about this, right, and this is why it's super important this episode to think about how you're building your interview and your questions and everything is by the end of that process, it was bar none this candidate. There were no questions to be asked. Like in our group of 4 managers who we all had biases, right? We all had employees in the group who were like, oh, this person would be a really good manager when we were starting that. Even if you're trying to be as fair as possible, you're going to have some of those biases because you've worked with people more in certain regions. But by the end of that, you really couldn't rebuttal a full written interview, a full panel interview, all of the answers. Hey, is this person answering a question fully and answering it from a different angle? What are they going to add to this group of 4 that we already have? I mean, I was really proud, even though it did take a lot of time. I was really proud of the result.
Well,
And you're right, it took the bias out that you had somebody on your team that applied that would have been phenomenal. And the regional manager in the east had somebody on his team that
Yep.
would have been phenomenal, and the regional manager in the south had somebody on her team that, you know what I mean. It set the stage such that folks weren't necessarily pulling for, this is my person, that's my person.
Mm-hmm.
uh, okay, sorry Chris, I cut you off.
Well,
no, no, not at all. I think the point I was going to make was if I remember correctly, I think you came to me with that decision and I questioned it, and you pulled out your rubric and your scoring, and there was no room for me to argue the point, and was like, go for it. But I think what you stated was right too, is that you've got to, this is a time investment, right? And what you guys are talking about is a process that was taking an internal team and looking for a promotion because we knew we had the talent pool within the team. But I think this translates to outside the company as well, right? It works
Sure.
just as
right.
well for if you were mixing in outside candidates. We've all been part of Jeremy, I think you and I finished twice in a couple of pools where we were the person outside the company that they were comparing to the inside person, right? Just to see if there's anybody else better out there. This type of thing, though, fits whether you're doing an internal hire or an external hire. Having that rubric, having those stages, having the diversity of voices to give you an objective perspective, you did get the right person, and she was dynamic. She was an amazing employee, and continued to grow, and I think is still continuing to grow, from what I understand. Right, so
Yeah.
I think that took some out from where we were at the time. There wasn't anything like a podcast like this that could help us with that. You guys kind of came up with that, but it is interesting that what you did really does fit into a nice tidy package of, if you do these things, good things come out the other side, right?
Yeah.
So kind of being thoughtful that we've got other items on the list. Do you guys have anything else you want to add to that, or wrap it up before we move forward?
No, I think yeah, she did. She was the best candidate, by the way. Did amazing. Region great. Still doing well, like you said, as far as all of us know. And the one other point I'll make there is the people who definitely weren't even competing really. I mean, they got so much feedback on how to be able to ace that interview when they got to that level that you won't get in a normal interview. You'll just usually get you're not the best fit for the role. It's okay. Well, we like Jeremy said, we went through everyone. We said, well, you didn't address team size here, budget, timeline, or this. And they were like, oh, okay. We didn't do it in a mean way, right? Because we didn't have to open it up to them. But anyways, yeah, we both liked it.
Well, and I think if it's okay just to move forward, what you just talked about ties into the next one, is focus on that candidate experience, right?
Mm,
What you guys did was focused on the entire candidate pool, right? When you're talking about focusing on the candidate experience, you want to make sure you're providing clear communication. Maintain clear communication throughout that interview process. Keep the candidates informed about whether there is a next step, what happens next. Be thoughtful about that. A lot of us have put out resumes and either got nothing, or you get some form letter crap. And I get everybody only has a certain amount of time, but be thinking about the person on the other end of that email, or the lack of communication that you're not providing.
right.
Be respectful and timely, right? Treat all the applicants with respect. You guys talked about that. You treated everybody fairly, you treated everybody equally, you communicated clearly with them. Even if they haven't been selected, there were 2 companies out of the 150 that I applied to that their rejection letter was so good, I wrote them a thank you for their rejection because it felt sincere. It
Mhm.
felt like they actually stopped to take a look at it wasn't false. It really felt like, and again, I put that company on a list somewhere. Like if they ever have an open position again, that's the kind of company I want to work for because they took the time to be thoughtful,
Right.
you know? And then the last thing is provide a positive candidate experience, right? It reflects well on you. It reflects well on the company. You'll get stronger candidates if you do that. You know, people want to know that how you're treating them through the interview process is an insight into how they're going to be treated as employees. You know, if you're dismissive or you say it's a 30-minute interview and it's 10, right? What are you saying to that employee or that potential employee, even if it was a positive experience? Guys, what do you think about that one?
Oh, sure. Gosh, I had an interview I was super excited about. I had coordinated with the CEO through LinkedIn. She set me up with an interview as an ed tech company, I think out of Texas. Had set me up with an interview with their um, CFO or CTO is the first interview. He showed up 10 minutes late, didn't look at the camera at all for the remaining 15 minutes that we had because it was a 25-minute interview. Was obviously doing Slack or email, had something going on. You know, as I was talking, he was looking over here and typing, and I don't know if I would have been in the running or not, but when I got done, I pulled myself out of that candidate pool. Nope, this is not a place to, you know, and the job market the way it is right now, it's an employer's job market. There are candidates out the wazoo. It's a phenomenal candidate pool out there. And I worry a little bit in seeing some of that behavior out there that, you know, when things shift around, and they will, you remember how things were in 2018, it was hard to find really, really good candidates.
Right.
That's going to happen again, and people are going to remember those experiences that they had at those companies and with those people and with those employers. And um, you know, not to mention, well, we all come from that kind of customer success background, right? um, how you treat people matters. And that candidate experience, do you follow up? How, you know, that word of mouth travels. People talk about you, people talk about your company. There's an opportunity here to treat people well, even those people that you're not hiring.
Right.
And to Chris's point, send them away with a good taste in their mouth and well wishes. And you know,
Yeah.
hey, if something else opens up here, please come back and see us. um,
Yeah. I think the important part there is like you're saying, Jeremy, is I think it's think about quality over quantity sometimes, right? If you're going to do a bunch of interviews to really get through a big portion of people, keep them 15 minutes, make sure you know what you're exiting people on, and maybe even tell them at the end of the interview, right? Like bad news does not age well. And you'd be, you know, being nice to them in a way, right? If you're just like, hey, this isn't the best position role for you, but keep applying to the other ones. Like, don't we really like certain aspects of your resume. It's just not the best fit for this position. Go ahead, Jeremy. You got questions?
Jeremy has a
I've got a
question.
question. I'm going to toss a question out to you guys. So, do you follow up with, and if so, at what point, candidates that you don't hire directly, or do you allow that communication to go through the HR departments?
I think it's a fair question. In my memory, especially when we were working together at the last ed tech place, I don't think we were allowed to reach out to them. I think that had to go through
Yeah.
HR. They wanted to kind of keep that separate. Um, you know, I did have someone reach out to me on LinkedIn recently that had interviewed with me. We had a very good conversation. They ended up not being hired, but they stayed connected with me.
Oh.
Right, and had a question about a different role somewhere else, and I thought that was interesting. So again, treating somebody with respect could pay dividends, and I'm going to bring up the point that I've made in the past that the toes you step on today could be attached to the butt you kiss in the future, because you never know, that person gets a senior role and you get laid off or you quit. You never know, especially in an industry like ed tech. It ain't that big, and there's a lot of us that all know each other. You know, I mean, my new boss worked at both Pearson and Amplify 5 years before I did. We knew a lot of the same people, right? So reputationally, it was good that I, you know, had a decent reputation along the way. Um,
Oh, I'm still holding out hope. Rhett's gonna employ us both well into our retirement years at some point, right?
Oh, yeah,
I will.
I'm gonna be his caddy.
Right.
Listen, I'll make sure you both have the best tapioca possible. All right.
Aw, he's a giver. All right, anything on that one, Rhett, before we move on?
No, sir. You nailed
All
it.
right. All right, the last one, sell the opportunity, not just the job. And what we mean by that is make sure you're painting a clear picture because, you know, you can tell people what the job is, but help them understand the role's impact within the company and the potential for growth. We talked about that on the last episode is, are you asking questions about what the growth potential is for the job? Have some of that ready as the hiring manager. Highlight career development, you know, discuss what opportunities there are for professional development and learning. I got my MBA because one of the companies I worked at provided that as an add-on, and you were at a ceiling in that company. You could not go above a director if you didn't have your MBA, right?
Mhm.
So I knew that going in when I got my director role. You have to have an MBA if you want to go any higher in the company. And then finally, showcase the company culture. We talked about this, you know, not necessarily pizza night, but give people a glimpse into the company culture, the work-life balance. How does that work? You know, what are your expectations? I had one of my new folks, I had sent an email asking a question and she answered me like 5 hours later in the evening and was apologizing that she hadn't gotten back to me right away because she was at school picking up her kids. And I wrote her back, I'm like, you never have to apologize for prioritizing your family. I've been here 2 days. Just tell me when those times are, and I'm not going to bother you. Right.
Right.
That to me is part of the culture. But are there things like that within the company that you can talk to, you know? So I don't know. Jeremy, Rhett, what do you guys think?
I think this is an opportunity for the hiring manager to really partner with their HR recruiter.
Mhm.
So I think a lot of times, I'm sure you guys have experienced this when you're talking to recruiters. They may or may not their level of knowledge about the position they're hiring for can vary pretty greatly, company to company, recruiter to recruiter. And if you're able to, if you're in a position that does a lot of hiring, if you're able to partner up and buddy up and buy a pizza party or a coffee for the recruiter that you have that's responsible for your area, your department, kind of setting some expectations about things that you'd like to have covered during that initial screener interview.
Right.
These are things that I want to share. And I remember one time I took that on for myself. I had a high priority role that I needed to fill. I grabbed 30 candidates from the candidate pool. I emailed them all directly, said find 30 minutes on my calendar. And I did 30 minute touch points with everybody that week as ultimately I was the hiring manager, but I did it as an informational. Here's all the stuff I want you to know about the company. Here's the job details, the compensation details, the benefit details, the company culture. Do you have any questions? And if you're still interested, I'll send you in through the process, right? Because I wanted to jumpstart it, but that's not sustainable. That's not a good use of my time. It's not a good use of, you know. So I learned my lesson there. I got a nice little polite chastising from the HR director at the time. But you got to keep things moving. You got to be nimble. And if an HR recruiter on my team were to do that with candidates, I would be blown away. I would be so amazed. I'd be so grateful. I'd be sending Starbucks gift cards every week, right? Like, because that's what you want that first interview to look like is here's all the detail about why the company is great, or why the hiring manager is great, why the team's great, why we're changing the world.
Yeah.
But and be honest, if it's not the right role, somebody will pull out. I had two people after my 30-minute interview, and I think I'm a lot of fun in interviews, but just say, this isn't what I want to be doing. I was doing B2B2C, like insurance, and yeah, the role sounds great, you sound great, the company sounds great, but this isn't what I want to do for the next. Yep.
Yeah.
But you were being clear, you were being transparent, you had clearly articulated, and it gave them an opportunity to go, wow, this sounds great for the right person. And it
Right.
saved you both time or frustration because you're like, this is the person. And then they go,
Mhm.
yeah, no, I'm not interested after you've let go all the other candidates and you wanted to hire them, right? So
Right.
I think it's a great point. All right, we have spent a lot of time on the things you should be doing as hiring managers, and hopefully, those of you in that role or someday may be in that role, even if you're interviewing, be thinking about those things as you're going through the interview. Are they providing you those things? But here are a couple of things to think about that you shouldn't be doing as a manager when you're trying to hire. The first one is relying solely on the resume and now even AI, right? The resume is a great starting point. A resume is your calling card, but it doesn't always paint the whole picture. If they've got some or most of the qualifications, or your qualifications are really super narrow and specific, look for a whole picture. You know, at least get a chance to talk to those people, look at the whole experience, and get a sense of whether they may or may not fit into your culture, and look at it that way. Um, it's easy to fall prey to unconscious bias, right? We all have them, but like what we talked about and what you guys utilized, using standardized questions, creating diverse interview panels, blind resume reviews, like you guys said, you took stripped names out of them and had everybody look at things. It does tend to minimize those unconscious biases. Doesn't mean you're deliberately trying to avoid something, but we all have them. And having those tools and things in place will keep you from falling into that trap. And then the last one is don't focus on impressing them. Make sure you're assessing. An interview is always a two-way street. And Jeremy, you said it perfectly before. You want to make sure they fit you as much as you fit them, right? Make sure you're asking open-ended questions. Make sure you're listening to the responses. Make sure you're taking notes. Ensure they have a real opportunity to learn about the role in the team. Guys, what do you think? Anything you want to add on to those? Because I think they're really kind of reemphasizing the things that you should be doing, right?
Yeah, I think it just goes back to, just like you're saying, everything that we discussed, right? How do you not rely solely on the resume? Well, you make sure that you're thinking about why you're asking the questions you're asking. What types of answers are you looking for? What are the key points that you're looking for? What are the things that you can teach? What are the things you can't teach, right? And being able to identify those helps you not only strip out people who have been able to get a good resume together but can't actually do it, compared to those who maybe don't have as strong of a resume. Be like, man, you should speak a lot better about yourself because you're a great candidate. On unconscious bias, that goes with the questions, right? You ask everyone the same questions. You make sure you're grading them in the same way, and making sure you know what you're looking for. Yeah, I like those 2 points in particular.
Okay.
Jeremy?
Yeah, the unconscious bias. I've had the privilege of being able to work remote since I think 2000. Before it was cool, right? It didn't get cool until 2020. Um, and I actually used to do my interviews remotely without cameras.
Yep. Phone
Um,
calls. You were
yeah,
doing that when you were doing that when
yeah,
I came to, oh yeah, you were doing that when I came to work for you. Yep.
yep. I wanted to meet the person and not, this is before backgrounds were readily available, and didn't want to be judging somebody on their background or their dress or their,
Right.
whatever might be going on in the background. So, that was my little trick for doing that. But, another benefit to being aware of that um, is, are you getting people with different skill sets they could bring to the team, right? Maybe they're a great customer success manager, limited experience, but they're an awesome marketer and you need that. Or they're a data guy in their spare time and you need that. Or, maybe have been in a leadership position and they don't want that anymore. It is an opportunity to grab somebody with phenomenal experience that wants to be an individual contributor again. And so I think just kind of recognizing those things that can kind of tug at you and say, is this person right? What could this person bring to the table? Maybe is a better question to ask yourself.
Yeah.
So this is great, Chris. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, just to tie it off there, what you guys said about the candidate when you went through your process that you ended up picking, had you not had all of those standardizations and rubrics and kind of gates and triggers, she might not have even made it to the point where you picked her
No.
because of the unconscious bias of, like you said, she's only been here 6 months. She comes from a different background, all of these things that would have been like, would she be our best choice? But because you standardized it, you didn't fall into some of these traps. You kind of stripped the non-objective parts out, and really made it who's best for the role. You got the best candidate. So I think we went through again. I love these conversations. I think I learn something every time we talk about it, and how I write most of the script, and I still learn a lot of this stuff, so I love these conversations. I'm so excited. We're on our 10th episode. We miss our friend Mark Russell. I'm sure he would have had a quote or two that would have been relevant. I tried to find one because I can certainly not replace him. I didn't come up with a good one, but we'll have to check with him next time. All right, a programming note before we sign off. In order to make sure that we're providing you all the best top quality content, we're actually going to start moving our podcast to a bi-weekly schedule after this episode. So we wanted to get the ball rolling. We wanted to get the foundation set. We've got 10 episodes behind us on a weekly basis. I hope you've all enjoyed them. We can see everybody's listening every week, and that's great. We're going to go to a bi-weekly schedule, really more so that we can provide you ongoing quality content. We hope you'll come along with us and, help us grow and evolve as we keep investing in this podcast. So with that, thank you for joining us on this episode of the Generational Exchange. As always, we hope you found the conversation between our generations and interesting, and they sparked some new ideas and helped you see the business world from fresh perspectives. Don't forget to subscribe. This is really important for us. Don't forget to subscribe for more insightful discussions across the generations. If you have a topic you'd like us to talk about or a burning question you want us to answer, leave a comment or shoot us an email at cmsrconsulting@gmail.com. All of us are on LinkedIn. We're very visible. Find us, talk to us. We'd love your feedback. So, actually, in 2 weeks, until then, from all of us here at the Generational Exchange, thanks for listening and happy learning.